Good afternoon. I am delighted to be here at VMSG talking as part of the social media and communication session. And what I'd like to do is talk more about how we can learn lessons from the volcanic community to help develop better, more effective alert level systems for pandemics. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about what alert level systems are, then about how volcanic alert level systems can teach us a few things, and then how we might be able to use those to develop more effective COVID-19 alert level systems. Of course, we have a history of pandemics. We know these events were going to happen. It was just a matter of time, but it does seem to have taken us a bit by surprise. And so we end up in seeing many of these things on our television, and our lives have radically changed. It is, however, no surprise that if we look back at records, we can see that actually of the 38 deadliest environmental disasters, 6 of them have been due to epidemic disease, and they account for 30% of the fatalities recorded. So not very frequent events, but certainly big killers. And unlike a volcano, we can't just run away and evacuate. We actually need to stay put to break those routes of transmission. And it's difficult for emergency managers because quite often it's hard to identify when a crisis has emerged. You know, once we see people being ill and identifying as something different from, say, a seasonal flu, by that point, it's too late. It's already spreading. And in our international connected world, it has already gone very, very fast elsewhere, and it becomes very difficult to contain. It was, however, predicted. We were expecting it, as Mani Mazaturi says. Past warnings of the pandemic were often ignored despite mounting evidence. So one of the things that we could do, and some nations have done, is to develop an alert level system to help prepare for a pending crisis. Now, alert level systems are just simple triggers. They are part of a warning system that's basically where experts usually impart some information related on scientific data, and it's usually issued by the scientists, but sometimes there'll be emergency managers or other experts involved in that process of assigning an alert level. And then we have different alert levels that signify different tipping points or thresholds, and they can be designed in different ways. They can be numbers, they can be a traffic light system, and they can quite often be standardised on national or international levels. But essentially, they're to give public awareness about escalating and de-escalating crisis that enables also federal agencies to act. Now, COVID-19 meant that essentially a number of nations adopted alert level systems, rather more to manage the ongoing crisis rather than for an early warning. You can see here the system devised and adopted by Singapore government, which they have for all sorts of infectious diseases. And there have been some very effective systems put into place. As I said, they tend to help manage the ongoing crisis. One of the most effective systems that has been used has been that by New Zealand. And you can see here it's using 4 different levels, and it has prepare, reduce, restrict, lockdown as the different titles of those. And actually it was nominated to be one of the most effective COVID responses in the world. And this is partly because it helps people to have a picture of how their future might look and feel if they're in different alert levels. And that's because this alert level very specifically outlined what the different measures and restrictions were at each different level for each different aspect of life, whether that's public health, travel, transport, education, health and disability, workplace, and so on. So it's absolute clarity. And in many ways, this helped create an enormous amount of credibility, accountability, and transparency between the public and the government authorities. It was also very clear to find online. In somewhat stark contrast, the UK COVID alert level systems that have been devised have been somewhat more confusing. We have 2 systems in place. Initially, a national alert level system that was introduced in May, somewhat a while after the lockdown had been in place. And then in October, we had a more local tiered system put in place to recognise the fact that different cities or regions needed perhaps different restrictions to other areas, and it wasn't fair to penalise everyone. Now, this was challenging because the UK has 4 nations, and Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland had their own systems in place, many drawing on the English system and adapting it, but there being a number of differences. There's also been a distinct lack of expertise from those in the disaster community, either professionally or academically. And that's really shown in how this crisis has been managed and the design of these alert level systems. There's also been a real lack of transparency. We don't know anything about the Joint Biosecurity Centre. The rules keep changing, it's not very clear, and generally the public have been quite confused. On top of that, we've had a lot of failures in terms of preparedness around testing facilities and providing key workers with appropriate equipment and so on, and the health system being prepared. So how can we learn from volcanic hazards or pandemics? What's the link there? Well, actually, volcanic alert level systems are some of the most used systems in the entire world of any alert level system, apart from, say, weather, which is an everyday hazard. Volcanoes have a huge diversity of hazards, many of which have different alert level systems themselves. But each volcano might have its own alert level system, or there might be an alert level system for a regional or national level or international level that we see for volcanic ash, for example, for pilots. And geographically, each country, each nation has their own standardised system that is defined and shaped by their own cultural, social, economic and political context and beliefs, and which shape the way that they operate and the way that the alert level system operates. And that's what part of the Volcano Alert Level Working Group that I'm part of is trying to do, is catalogue all of those. They are frequently used in observatories all around the world, going up and down the scales, and they're frequently reviewed. How can we improve these to enhance their effectiveness? And we've got lots of lessons that we've learned in that process that we can impart to other hazards. Yes, pandemics are differently because they have different monitoring systems and different aspects involved in those, but essentially it's still a coordination and awareness, a heads up between different organisations and agencies, much as volcano alert level systems. And we have many different designs. Popocatépetl, you can see here in Mexico, has a traffic light system. The system here, adopted by the Japanese Meteorological Agency, uses terms, levels, and also gives very specific explanations about what needs to be done, giving risk actions like evacuate, do not approach the volcano, and so on. And then this system here by Montserrat, for example, is based on the island being divided into different regions, and different regions can have different alert levels depending on the risks involved, partly due to the people working or living in that area. So what are my three key takeaway points? Well, the first thing that's really important is that we need to use translation and multi-way communication. And what I mean about that is you've got, on one hand, you've got the scientists, especially in volcano observatories, who are trying to be credible and determine that they're scientifically robust, and they'll have their own external, internal experts around that. They're then communicating with the policy domain, who are trying to see what's relevant. This is federal agencies, government agencies, weather service, landowners, media, the public, and so on. These guys are trying to say what is relevant and how is it relevant to us. And to do that, we have a whole suite of tools that you can see in the middle here. Some of those are, of course, volcano alert level systems, and these are kind of one-way systems from the science to the policy, where an alert level is issued with information statements and so on, because you can't convey everything in just one alert level. But also there are other things where they, in the middle, we can bring scientists and policy folk together to actually discuss and talk, such as having information centres and workshops and media and press releases. And equally, we can have communication tools that enable multivalent communication. So that's where we can pick up the phone, have meetings, social networking and so on, and increase that communication. But of course, part of that is also being prepared, having those coordination plans, protocols, policies and laws in place, so that when that crisis hits, we can respond. And that seems to be one of the big failures with pandemics. The decision to change an alert level, I've learned, is not so easy, actually. Yes, the alert level is a shorthand to what's going on, but actually we need to interpret scientific data to determine that. And it's actually more than just using the science. It's a complex negotiation of perceived political, economic and environmental risks, and that makes it a very challenging thing to do. An alert level system cannot convey all the information on its own. It needs additional information. Just giving one little icon is not enough. But it is a difficult process, and we need to engage with that. And finally, the standardisation of it. My own research looking at standardisation of volcano alert level systems has shown the challenges involved in terms of trying to keep it locally relevant, but nationally understood and relevant to a broader a population. And this means that alert levels need to be scalable and so they can accommodate local contingency, but actually be identified on a national level, so not to create confusion as has seen in the UK system. So what makes an effective system? Well, what we need to do, what we can learn from VALs to PALs, from volcanic alert level systems to pandemic alert level systems, is, well, first of all, we need to do all the things that we do on volcanoes, a forensic analysis, look at how things are going on local global scales, from early warnings to warnings during the crisis, how cross-border and standardised alert level systems should and could be in place, and which of those have succeeded and failed during COVID. And there is a need to adopt these 5 key lessons that I've said from Volcano. So of course, first is working in multiple directions, multiple stakeholder engagement using all those communication tools. As part of that is integrating credibility, relevance and legitimacy as part of that science policy interface. We need to consider the design of standardised systems to make sure that they are nationally relevant and locally relevant and useful and valuable at each level. But equally, we need to invest in preparedness, and that's what we're so actually really good at in volcanoes, to develop a fully integrated warning system and to work nationally and internationally with the experts to draw on the expertise, of course, of the World Health Organization and co, but also from experts such as from volcanoes, tsunamis, weathers and other hazards that have so many useful lessons and stories to tell. So I hope this has been an interesting talk for you and we've learned some lessons. If you want to learn more, I've just founded the UCL Warning Research Centre, where we're going to focus much more on what warnings can do and how they can improve our lives. Thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.